Hi, everybody. I'm sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs. I'm the host of the Sports Psychology Hour, which airs every Sunday morning from 7 to 8 a.m. Central Time on 810 WHB radio here in Kansas City. You can hear it on 810WHB.com on the internet. I've been on the air for 33 years, and I talk about the mental side of sports. I'm in my 44th year of work as a sports psychologist. And in addition to my radio show, we're now doing podcasts and live stream. So go to my website, which is winnersunlimited.com. and click on the podcast tab. You can get close to 10 years of podcasts on there. And I'm doing a whole new series of conversations now with coaches and athletes. And I'm really lucky to have a very established young woman on the show with me today. Her name's Dana Talbot. She's from Connecticut. Hi, Dana. Thanks for waving. And she is a former college gymnast, but she coaches cheer. She's been doing it for a long time. Her husband does it. Her kids are involved in it. She said, and they're all at the world level, correct?
Correct.
So you know what you're doing. Okay. You've had tremendous success. Your bio speaks for itself. So first of all, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You know, I talk on this show all the time about the mindset and the mental side of sports and preparation, focus, attitude, confidence. In Kansas City, I'm a huge Chiefs fan. I've worked with a number of Chiefs players. In fact, one of the players I work with did pretty good in the game Sunday. And I ran into, during the game, a former client of mine named Nick Lowry, who when he retired in 1996, was the all-time leading scorer in field goals in NFL history and the most accurate kicker in NFL history. He's going to come in next week. And we were talking about, he said, the mental side, he goes, Andy, the mental side that you work with me on was the difference. He goes, if I hadn't done that, I don't know where I'd be. And I always like to say, Dana, you can have two athletes who are physically the same, but the one with the stronger mind will come out on top. So tell me a little bit about your background. Tell me about your philosophy about the mental side and how you coach athletes with that.
Well, like you said, actually was a collegiate gymnast, started gymnastics at age 5. Never involved in cheer, but all-star cheer was not a thing back in the day. So when my husband and I met, he was just starting out extreme cheer, and I joined him, and I've been coaching extreme since we opened now 23 years ago. We're located.
So let me interrupt you real quick.
Sure.
I'm guessing in these 23 years you've probably seen just about everything.
Oh, I've seen about everything. Absolutely. 100%. I absolutely love coaching. As far as my philosophy goes, is like you said, mindset is everything. It doesn't matter if you have two talented athletes. If you're not 100% confident, you're not going to get the same results. So for sure.
So throughout your career, what have you noticed with athletes today? Here it is, 2024. You've been doing this a long time. Are we seeing now I talk so much about social media. We're on social media now, obviously.
Right.
But I always encourage, especially the professional Olympic level athletes I work with, to get off social media. Don't be on it during their seasons, because it becomes such a distraction, such a negative. And what ends up happening is they lose their focus. They get caught up in that. They start listening to what other people say. And typically what other people say is pretty negative.
Oh, always. Compared to back in the day when you didn't have the pressures of social media, where you have now, where kids are comparing themselves to others. Maybe they see another kid that is a better athlete, has more skill. Maybe they look better in their uniform, in their mind. Either way, those social pressures don't help or add to, value to the athlete's performance, for sure. So I always tell the kids, a positive mindset is everything.
So with competitive cheer, it's a team event. Okay.
Yes.
So tell us about how you coach a team to get everybody to get together and to be fluid in their actions and moves.
Oh, that's the hardest thing. Keeping them engaged and keeping them motivated is probably number one. I think that we have to set goals from the very beginning, and all of us have to be at that same level of mindset where we all want to achieve those goals together. And I always tell my kids, you're really only strong as your weakest link. So we all have to have that same goal and that same mentality and that same drive. But I also explain to them that it's also a lifestyle. It goes way beyond what we do at practice or on the mat. There's things outside of the gym that we have to do to make you the best athlete you can be, taking care of your mental health, taking care of your physical health, eating well, working out. All Stars is We average about 4.5 hours to 5 hours of practice a week. That's really not a lot for some sports, but it is a year-round sport. So outside of that, we have to take care of ourselves to make sure that when we come in, we're prepared for practice.
That's really not a lot of time.
It really isn't. It's not, but it's a full year sport. So you're going around year round. Summer hours usually are all your training time. And then between the months of December and usually April, you're competing an average of 2 weekends a month. So it's a lot, but it's also a lot of fun.
Okay, from when you started to now, you just mentioned the topic mental health, which obviously I'm a sports psychologist, which is what I talk about. I've talked about it forever. And for the longest time, people would say, oh, come on, that's not that important. They're athletes. They're tough people. They're strong. And I'm like, athletes are people. They still have feelings. They have
They still have
emotions.
feelings, yes.
So what do you see as a coach mentally, some of the key issues that you have to deal with your athletes on from a psychological perspective? Because I always say, Dana, a good coach is a good psychologist. A bad coach needs a sports psychologist. So, I mean, from that perspective, you are a psychologist because you've got to analyze, interpret. You got to be a good communicator. You've got to be a good listener. How
100%.
do you work with athletes that way?
Well, it's not easy for sure for any coach because every athlete is different, and every athlete can actually needs to be coached differently. But a lot of athletes nowadays, they don't really adhere to the tough love. They all want the same goals. They all have the same goals. They all want to win, and they're all willing to work to get there. But the biggest thing that we have trouble with now a lot is those mental blocks where kids struggle to or have fears to tumble. And usually 90% of the time, the tumbling is backwards, not forwards. And I always say it's because with forwards, they can kind of see where they're going. So they have control. Backwards, they don't. Those mental blocks are really hard to get through, but they're all fear-based, confidence-based, and they're not easy to work through. And some of them break through with time and confidence building, and some of them struggle with it for the rest of their career. But that's the biggest thing that we see as coaches right now that is tough to deal with.
So how do you, that's a great issue to look into here. So the topic of fear is something I've talked about forever. I don't care what the sport. I was the United States Olympic team psychologist back in the 80s with our cycling team. And we had one of our greatest female cyclists ever had a fear of going downhill. She's going, 50 miles an hour straight down a hill. That's pretty darn scary.
Absolutely.
And that kept her from really ever being a world champion. She was, in the top three at the Worlds, I think it was 1983 in Switzerland. But had she overcome that fear, it would have gotten her through it. So how do you work with an athlete to get through a fear? Because obviously that's, when it comes to confidence and you throw fear in there, that can become just this giant roadblock.
It's a huge roadblock, but with really good coaching and really good coaching staff, you can just take it one day at a time. Some of them go through, a lot of them will end up taking private lessons and doing the one-on-one thing. So they get more repetition. And then some of them just, during a team practice, will stand there, we'll spot, we build confidence with them. We explain to them just to give it some time. We always say with each athlete, like popcorn, each of them pops at a different time. Some of them will progress at a faster pace and some of them will not. But that's okay not to compare themselves. Obviously, with having a mental block, it's all fear-based and confidence. So if we can build them up, which is what these athletes are here and what they need to do, then a lot of times they'll break through. And then there's other times that they just don't, they're listening to the little things in their head as opposed to, even though their muscle memory knows what to do, their head tells them otherwise.
Right. And so where does that fear come from? Where do you think, like, if you can use a specific young lady you've worked with, maybe who had some fear and you're able to help her overcome it, where do you think that comes from?
That is a good question because there's no particular age or person that can develop a mental block. And at times they can develop at any time. A lot of it can come from, unfortunately, a fall or injury, and it just sticks with them. And some of them just develop it over time and it just happens. Some of it's the pressure. I find as well that some of the kids that are just coming in, doing their job, The parents are just the parents and support them. And they come in, they're different sometimes than the kid that has the parent that tends to be, I don't want to use the word helicopter parent, but the parent that is
Overwhelming.
a little overwhelming, a little too much, maybe pressure. Maybe they don't want to disappoint their parents, or maybe they just put that pressure on themselves. But there's no other real particular person or type that it can develop with anyone.
Does the word perfection come into play there? Because I have so many athletes I've worked with throughout my career who will come in, and the way it works with me, the first session I'll see when parents bring their son or daughter in, I'll meet with the parents first for about a
Right.
half hour, and then we'll bring the athlete in about why are you here? And it happens so often where I'll get, the young lady or young man say, well, I'm a perfectionist. Really? Well, who's perfect? Well, nobody, but I'm a
Nobody.
perfectionist. Okay, so right away we've got an issue. And why are you perfect? Then they look over at their parents because they want me to be. So we always have to deal with that type of stuff. Is that something you have to deal with sometimes, where the parents' expectations, if you do really well at this and you succeed, you could get a scholarship, you could, become very prominent. You have to deal with that with parents a lot of the time.
All the time. Fear of failure is probably the number one thing that obviously kids fear. And like you said, just having to be perfect. And some of the unrealistic expectations, maybe that the parents, unknowingly put on them, or they just put on themselves. But I have noticed that over my 20 years that the burnout rate is much larger with the parents that are overly involved per se. And I
Yes.
know that they're not trying to be overly involved, they're just trying to be a support system. But the ones that hang around the gym, the ones that are peeking through the windows, the ones that are, constantly worried, they might accidentally be putting their worry on their own child.
And they're the ones that always have questions for you after practice.
Oh, absolutely. Or have their own concerns, but yet the kid never shows those concerns or issues in the gym, and whether or not they have them and they're telling them to their parents, or whether they're not, unfortunately, the parents accidentally are projecting it on them.
Yeah. So I'm a big proponent of the preseason meeting, before things get started, where you sit down and have the athletes and parents there together. Talk
Always.
about your philosophy. Here's what we're here to do. Here's as parents, here's what I see your role being and everything. Do you work through all that with them?
100% host a parent meeting every single season. I have a full handbook online on my website. I ask the parents to go through it and read it word for word. And understandably, we're busy, so parents don't. Some of them show up, some of them, don't, and they'll have questions after. But yeah, we set the expectations with our season. It's kind of trial and error. After doing 23 years of this, you learn what you have to do, what you have to fix, what works, doesn't, and what doesn't work. But absolutely, setting the precedent from the very beginning is huge for a successful gym. Because
So let me ask this question, because like I said earlier, a good coach is a good psychologist, and you wear many hats as a coach. When you get a new young lady, do you have boys as well as girls?
oh yes,
Okay. So are you a young person then, I'll say, come in, can you pretty much know after one or two sessions if the parents are going to be pushy or not? I mean, how quick does it take for you to figure them out?
I guess it really depends on each situation. Doesn't take usually long. You usually know in the first couple weeks, based on either the emails, the text messages, the questions that come in. And like I said, strangely enough, I feel like the kids that stay in it the longest are the parents that I hear the least from, which is strange. It's not that they're not involved, or they're just kind of going with the flow and supporting their athlete and just being their biggest cheerleader. I feel like they stick with it the longest. I find that they get all the way through the world's level. And then the ones that kind of are hovering around, I would say, have a bigger burnout rate. And I don't think that the parents do it on purpose. I think they're still their
Right.
biggest cheerleader, but
Right.
I think they unintentionally give them their, whatever anxieties they're having, they kind of feed off of that.
Yeah, and so I think you're hitting on an important topic here, because I think for anybody who's going to be listening to our podcast here, if you're a parent, and I don't care what the sport you're involved in, but what Danny just says is really important. I think getting too involved I think the kids pick up on that. And then that puts pressure on the kids. And so the more you can stay back and let the kids take ownership of things, that's good.
Correct.
I would say, if when a child turns like 12, 13, 14, that's when they should take more ownership of what they're doing and not let the parent, prior to that, their issues, they can let the parents get involved because they may not know how to speak to you. I mean, do you agree
Right.
with that?
Oh, 100%. But we do encourage the kids to advocate for themselves. We tell the kids and the parents all the time that we have an open door policy. But a lot of times the parents don't come to us, they'll go to the coaching staff. And a lot of times we'll tell them, hey guys, if you have any questions, come to us. Half of those concerns go away or they don't address them. Or to us anyway. But for the kids, we tell them to advocate for themselves, that they can come to us. We want to be their support system. Sometimes we spend more time with these kids on the mat than their parents get to do during the week. So we want to be there for them and listen to them. Also, we try to teach our kids to kind of self-advocate, to kind of problem solve for themselves. If it's not a safety issue, and they're not in danger, not a health issue, then yeah, we do. We ask them to self-advocate for themselves.
What's the most exciting part of being a cheerleading coach?
Oh gosh,
because you see that whenever you see it, there's so much excitement and enthusiasm, and everybody's bouncing around. What's the best part about it?
Well, I mean, there's so many exciting things and aspects of it, and I think some of it has changed as I've gotten older. But obviously, the wins and watching them perform is my biggest passion. Watching them perform and come off that mat, either in tears of joy or just excitement, makes me feel like, okay, we're doing our job. So the celebration, of course, the medals and all that, that's just part of it. But it's all the memories that we create, that we travel together. We spend a lot of time together. We do bondings together. So it's the relationships that we form that is really exciting. And the fact that somebody like a Sammy, who now years later, we always hope that they can take something off the mat that they've learned. That's more important than just the competition aspect of it. Hopefully we've left some type of legacy so the kids, as they grow older and raise their own children, that, they could take a piece of that with them.
I mean, your husband and your kids are very successful with this as well. What's it like being a coach as well as a parent and a spouse when you've got that going on?
Crazy. It's absolute crazy. It's a 24-hour job. Obviously it is as a parent, but when you add them to the fact that they're also in my gym, they're on multiple teams, and there's just a lot of hats that there has to be worn. They also coach and work at my gym now that they're 17 and 15. So it's a lot of time management, but I also feel very blessed and lucky that I get to be around them. I'm sure there's times that we butt heads and we're around each other way too much, but I'm also excited that for all these years that my kids have grown up around me. I've got to see them all the time. Same with my husband. We get to spend a ton of time together.
Well, I'm sure the impact that you've had on them will last forever. Obviously, the fact that they're involved in this like this, I know it's and a topic I get into all the time about coaching your own kids and having them around you, because for some people it's really hard because they feel they've got to be harder on their kids than everybody else. And then some people are like, they try to ignore their kids more because they don't want to put the pressure on them. So how do you work through that?
It is hard. We do find that my husband and I find that we are a little bit harder on them because it's true. Some coaches deal with the fact they don't want people to think that we're showing favoritism to our own children, when the actual reality is we're so much harder on them, because it's hard to separate coach from parent. But when you're coaching them or your husband, because I actually coach my own husband still.
Oh, wait, hold on. You coach your husband. Okay, tell us how that works.
Dan. Oh, wow. Maybe you want to be asking him that question.
Do we need to set up a session for that with you and me? Well, I mean, seriously.
Yeah, you could probably
coach your husband. How does that work? Seriously, how does that work?
It's not easy, but since I'm coaching the team, I respect him so much, and his knowledge of the sport goes way even beyond what my knowledge is. So we'll defer to each other, which is great. I think what makes our program successful is the fact that what I bring to the table might be different than what Mike brings to the table. My husband is extremely knowledgeable when it comes to the sport of cheerleading. When we're talking about all aspects, from score sheets to just how it works, technique, where I bring the organization and really good practice and good coaching skills, leadership skills. So I think that we work very well together in that aspect. We've had to work on it. We've had to fine tune things. We're like, okay, we can't argue on the mat. Like, can't do that. Same with kids, same with my own kids, having to break that barrier of, this is not my mom right now, this is a coach. And we've had to separate that, where I've told them, right now I'm your coach and you have to treat me that same way, because if you treat me like your mom, then everyone else is going to think they can cross that line and treat me that way. So it's not been easy.
Yeah, I mentioned my book, Just Let Them Play, and my favorite chapter in here is embracing failure can lead to fun. And I think I talk about that all the time, because I don't care who you are going to fail, and it's how you learn from it. So how do you teach kids about failure? What do you tell them about it to help them overcome it and grow from it?
It sounds crazy, but I think failures is the best lesson that we have. You can't build on success without failures. I mean, I tell my kids all the time, we come in year by year, our choreography gets harder and harder, our teams get stronger and stronger. But with that, you're going to face adversity. And with adversity, then you're going to persevere. But if we came into practice and we have everything every time perfectly, why would we practice? There has to be failures. You have to go through failures, so that when the wins happen, it's that much more enjoyable. I mean, if you're winning all the time, it's just going to become, it's great to win all the time, but then it's not as special. I mean, you learn from your failures. You get better from your failures.
So as we wrap things up today, Dana, I'm going to give you three definitions three words I'd like your definitions of. First one is self-confidence.
Something found deep within. Something that is probably the most important aspect of not just as a competitor, but just in life.
I love
having
that
self-worth.
That's great. That's great. What is your definition of winning?
Ooh, that's a good one. Anything in life that makes you happy is a win.
I like your attitude. This is great. Okay, now the last one, what's your definition of losing?
Wow. I would say every loss can turn into a win, and it's a learning lesson. If you lose in anything, pick yourself up, never give up, push through, persevere, and just go that much harder. Never give up.
Dana Talbot, I can tell why you're successful. Okay.
Oh.
Just what I can say, that's be nice, but I mean it. I mean, I'll be nice too. But what you've just said makes so much sense. And I can see why you've had the success you've had with all these young people, coaching them, and with your husband coaching him as well, and your kids. But I want to thank you for joining us today. This has been a wonderful interview. If you'd like to share how people can get a hold of you, I'd love to hear it, so people, anybody listening can find out and get in touch with you.
Oh, I would love that. I'd just like to thank you so much for your time as well. And I look forward to actually reading your book as well. There's always, as coaches, there's always so much for us to still learn. I'm still learning every year. So if anyone wants to get in touch with me, you can reach me at Extreme Cheer. My website is extremecheerct.net. And you can like us on Facebook at Extreme Cheer. And be looking forward to hearing from anyone.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great interview, and the best of luck to you. I don't need to do that, because you already know what luck is. You've had a lot of it. So keep going, and thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, and if you want to get more episodes of our show, go to my website, winnersunlimited.com. Click on the podcast tab there, and you'll hear all kinds of episodes, over 10 years of them. If you want to get a hold of me, my email is drj@winnersunlimited.com. And my phone number is 816-561-5556. Take care, and we'll talk to you next week. When, I will say as I finish up, next week, I'm going to have my good friend Nick Lowry on. If you know who Nick Lowry is, when he retired in 1996, he was the all-time leading field goal kicker in NFL history, the most accurate kicker in NFL history. We worked together his last 12 years, and